The most important event in my life and in my friends' lives was bumping into Father Arizmendiarrieta. We were nonconformists just like him. To us, he had amazing moral authority. He led our way of thinking and behaving. Ulgor was rather like the starting point, the milestone in the emergence of the cooperative movement, more than 50 years ago. We would never have created Ulgor if it hadn't been because we wanted to, and indeed believed it was possible, to create a company in which man would prevail over capital.
In 1955, 5 young men from Mondragón buy a factory in Vitoria to manufacture paraffin stoves.
We bought the factory in Vitoria basically because it had a license for the manufacture of electrical appliances. The license was worded in such a generic way that in theory you could have made any type of electrical appliance there.
Just a few months later, now 1956, they construct an industrial building in Mondragón and transfer the factory to the area of San Andrés. This was the beginning of the company Talleres Ulgor, whose name was formed from the surnames of its founders. The new company would later be known as Fagor Electrodomésticos.
Why did we want to set up in Mondragón? Because we were from Mondragón. Because the colleagues we were going to bring together in this cooperative knew us and had faith in what we were going to do. Because Mondragón was a socially developed town.
The project, inspired and driven by the priest José María Arizmendiarrieta, is already underway. 13 years after he founded the professional school. During this time, his ideas and teachings have encouraged many young people in the town who will soon be joining the Ulgor staff.
As workers, we had to demonstrate that we were not just workers, but that we were capable of moving the company on ourselves.
In this sense, the founders have solid aims. Ulgor must be a democratic, participatory and supportive company, capable of generating jobs, wealth and social development. A company in which the worker members have control over their own future. The first Fagor products, a brand which arose from the contraction of Talleres Ulgor, are paraffin stoves and aluminium washers for the DKW van. Soon, a license is obtained in Germany to manufacture selenium plates to be used as semiconductors, and the catalogue now includes what is expected to be the flagship product, the Aladdin paraffin heater. Sales rocket. Work begins on building a new foundry and the electronics division is created, which starts producing selenium plates. In 1957, Father Arizmendiarrieta is behind the creation of a new company in Mondragón, Talleres Arrasate Cooperativa Industrial. Ulgor is still lacking a legal form in keeping with its founding principles. Then, Father Arizmendiarrieta looks for ways to overcome the limitations of the Cooperatives Act and draws up some new articles of association. Ulgor is officially registered as a cooperative in 1958.
Fagor emerges as a company with an extraordinary capacity to adapt to the modern era and to empathize with historic modernity in its different social, economic and political spheres. Cooperatives were a means of making people more free, while still being supportive of their environment, and therefore while still being aware of the fact that they formed part of a community of workers and a community of people.
After 3 years of intense activity at Ulgor, company sales start to become significant. Just at that time, something unexpected happens. The company Ramsar of Barcelona launches a lawsuit for the patent of the Aladdin heater, and the courts suspend production.
A few men from Barcelona who had a patent on it came forward, and it was terrible. The people were asking, what is going to become of us? And they were saying, this is what we had, but they are taking it away from us. So what now? Well, nothing happened, because our technicians were totally prepared to invent whatever. And another heater was invented. From the commercial point of view, we started to say that it was the first heater that could heat up breakfast and that type of thing. This served as a commercial argument and was a tremendous success. Then we had a flash of inspiration. If you put something out there that the commercial world can talk about, you can transmit and communicate that it is something different. That's worth a lot.
The managers of Ulgor decide to move forward, and they arrange the purchase of manufacturing licenses from European companies. Butane gas starts to replace paraffin as the domestic fuel, and new appliances flood onto the market. Cookers with a Fagor's license, and heaters with a Bulex license.
It was the mechanism for quickly setting up production lines for certain products. That was the potential that manufacturing licenses had. When we brought the butane cookers from Italy and we were going to present them in Madrid in 1958, we realized that we were going to be investing 10 to 12 million pesetas in advertising. At this point, we decided to register the trademark. We hadn't even registered it, and it was Fagor. We asked the Casa Anguria in Bilbao to register it, but they told us it wasn't possible, due to the fact that there was a trademark, Tago, that was devoted to making drills. As the outline was already done, and the logo too, we changed the T to an F, and came up with Fagor. What do you think of that? Good.
Fagor, la marca que simboliza el arte en cocina. Fagor, la cocina con horno visible de gran capacidad.
So the cookers offered flexibility. They had various heat sources with different levels of power. They were adjustable, very flexible, very nice to look at compared to anything else that had been made up to then. They were successful, combined with the butane gas cylinder and the aesthetic features. The cooker was an immediate hit.
Father Arizmendiarrieta, with his future vision, senses crisis situations that could affect the infant cooperative movement and suggests the creation of a credit entity.
A credit entity which, like the cooperative system introduced in Ulgor, also had to be cooperative, not a savings bank, not a bank, but rather a cooperative bank, which is what he created.
So, in 1959, the Caja Laboral Popular was established to support the cooperatives in their technical and financial aspects and in social provision. The participation of Ulgor is essential. The 1960s arrive, and Ulgor embarks on an extraordinary period of growth and consolidation. The original building is extended, the electronics building is constructed, activities begin in the hotel and catering business, with the manufacturer of industrial cookers, and a new office building opens. In Mondragón, 2 new cooperatives are created, Copreci and Edalan. Both will play an important part in Ulgor's history.
Do, re, mi, Fagor, escala de con por Fagor y
Fagor becomes one of the leading brands thanks to the promotion of its butane cooker range. Spain's economic boom also leads to high consumer demand. In 1964, the first refrigerators appear on the market, produced in the new manufacturing plant. At the same time, Ulgor's commercial department introduces the Fagor bus.
The Fagor bus was something new and unfamiliar. It was a mobile display which traveled all over and supported our distribution. It arrived at points of sale, at cities and at smaller towns, and distributors used the Fagor bus to promote the brand and promote their business. We also had some drivers who were naturally good at it, and this was also a tremendous help in getting the Fagor brand well known.
In the same year, 1964, the first regional cooperative group was created in Mondragón. This is Ularco. It is formed initially by Ulgor, Arrasate and Coprethi. Once again, it is a project initiated by Father Arizmendiarrieta.
One of the aims of Ularco was not to exchange resources, but rather for all the cooperatives to have at their disposal all of the resources that together they had: people, money, and technology. Ularco emerged basically as a self-defense mechanism for the cooperatives, which were still very small. They were developing within a hostile environment, and we were trying to join forces so that they could all help each other to come out on top as companies. In addition, this was in keeping with the cooperative principle, the principle of inter-cooperation.
A year later, the new facilities of the Polytechnic School open. The contributions from Ulgor have been essential in pursuing the work most dear to Arizmendiarrieta.
He always considered that the most important investment one could make in life was the investment in education. So he had an idea, I would say an ambitious long-term one, but not a concrete one. For this reason, he called it the cooperative experience. The first managers and technical teams were educated at this school. The people educated there did not only go on to Fagor, but also to other cooperatives. I would say that 80% came from this school.
Ulgor has its first split. The electronics division becomes Fagor Electrotecnica, and later Fagor Electronica. The new cooperative becomes part of the Ularco group.
What splitting into different cooperatives did was to concentrate on the technology that each one had to develop.
Ulgor is now the driving force behind the cooperative movement in the area and is its main referent.
Ulgor was rather like the testing ground for everything that was going to follow. The management plans were developed in Ulgor, as was the pay system. The same goes for the labor standards and the system of general meetings. Everything started in Ulgor.
In 1966, television advertising transforms Fagor into the most well-known brand among the public.
Fagorice su hogar con Cocina Fagor.
We chose an artist, a comic actor and comedian who had great influence at the time, Antonio Garissa. Using him and the concept of humor, we started our first serious campaign, which would enable the Fagor brand to be launched onto the Spanish market. It's one thing for the brand to be known, but you need to communicate what is behind the brand. We started to attach the concept of quality to the brand, communicating that it was a brand that was selling high-quality products.
And it is then that the first Fagor washing machines appear.
The automatic washing machine pre-washed, washed at 90 degrees, did 5 rinses, and then spun and drained the clothes without user intervention. And this was an enormous hit.
In 1968, the Polytechnic School is officially awarded the Technical Engineering degree. In Ulgor, the number of members increases substantially, almost doubling. And in just 12 years, Fagor products have become the clear leaders in the Spanish market. Fagor International is therefore created with the aim of starting exports. But before the end of the 1960s, Ulgor is faced with an unusual situation: the purchase of a public limited company.
Cepsa, whose trademark was Asper's, was the most important customer of Fagor Electrodomésticos. In reality, it was a commercial company owned by Hidroeléctrica Española. They soon discovered that the electrical appliance business was more complicated than selling electricity and said to us, "Listen, we're going to sell the company. If you want to buy it from us, fine. But if not, we're going to sell it to a third party." As Cepsa was our biggest customer, approximately 15 to 20% of our production was sold through them, we had to make the decision to buy. Although this was not what drove us most, we still had to buy. It was something new for us because we had never acquired a company of this size.
9 years later, after a slow integration process, the Cepsa workers would become permanent members of Ulgor. The land in San Andrés had already been completely built on, and Ulgor's expansion meant that more manufacturing space was needed. Finally, in 1970, after 2 years of building work, the new cooker and washing machine plant opens in Garagarza. This is an important step forward in the history of the cooperative.
For me, the opening of Garagarza has a special meaning, because the person who carried out the project and led the construction and assembly was Usatorre. And Usatorre died just a short time before the Garagarza plant opened.
The 1970s were marked by 2 major worldwide crises, which would have a direct effect on Ulgor's development.
The 1970s saw a terrible business cycle around the world because oil prices rose from $5 to $20 per barrel, which impacted on the entire economy.
A very competitive market and the increase in labor costs would make 1971 the first year without profits.
It's true that our articles of association always referred to the distribution of profits. It had never occurred to us to think that we would have to be distributing something else.
Quickly, therefore, the management take a series of measures.
Increasing productivity, improving models, improving organization, fighting costs.
With the obstacles overcome, in 1973 the company expands beyond the limits of Mondragón when the central warehouse opens in Vitoria. There is another split in Ulgor. This time, it's the hotel and catering division, which becomes the cooperative Fagor Industrial. In 1974, a new manual for assessing jobs and their labor indices sparks a strike for internal reasons. There are questions about the validity of the cooperative movement, and this marks the start of a traumatic period.
Our articles of association specifically provide for strike action as a serious offense, and as a consequence of this very serious offense, automatic expulsion. And that was the case. It had never happened before. The truth is that it should be recognized that those years were very complicated politically and were very hectic.
The members of Ulgor, brought together in a general meeting, decide to expel 17 people.
The fact that you had assumed responsibility for these people being sacked, based on your decision, in that context of extreme political awareness, left you with the feeling that there was something unresolved, which you had contributed to. Reinstatement did not take place until 4 years later. It was a tough experience, very tough.
In 1975, the Fagor cycling team continued to win sporting and publicity victories for the brand. Ulgor is already Spain's biggest exporter of electrical appliances, and in Garagarza, a new line of products starts to be manufactured: dishwashers.
In the early 1970s, we had already dispensed with licenses. I mean that we had already started to manufacture these products, but with our own means and using our knowledge, above all knowledge of the market, the Spanish market.
Ulgor's research and development team would also have the support of the recently established technological centre Ikerlan, driven by Father Arizmendiarrieta from the Polytechnic School. In 1976, Ulgor celebrates its 20th anniversary. In November, José María Arizmendiarrieta passes away. In his final work, he continued to look to the future.
Eskuz esku, buruz buru, indar barriturik, lanean elkarturik, lanaren bidez, gure lurralde estuan denuntzako, gizabide bizigarriagoak eratuko ditugu, eta lurralde hau edergarrituko dugu. Gure kidetasun barrietan txertatuko ditugu, auzo eta herri, herri eta beste guztiak. Aurrera beti!
At the end of the 1970s, Ulgor has 4 plants between Mondragón and Oñate, and is building the 5th in Bergara. But the economic crisis of 1979 would interrupt the cooperative's prosperity.
The crisis started in 1974, more or less, due to the increase in oil prices and the increase in costs. But thanks to the responsibility and the efforts of the cooperatives, the problems were overcome. However, I saw how other companies in the area went bankrupt. It was then that I realized that the cooperatives were the fundamental axis of the economy, and indeed the society in Mondragón.
Despite the effort to overcome the difficulties, the first cases of unemployment are seen.
Unemployment was something unknown. The fact that some of our members were at home without work was completely new. It was very hard.
The impact of the crisis quickly translates into financial losses. 1980 ends with considerable negative results, and 1981 was to be the worst financial year in the history of Ulgor. Forming part of the Ularco group turns out to be vital at this time.
The concrete fact of being part of a group enabled those cooperatives which needed to fill posts to take on people from Ulgor or from another cooperative instead of people from outside. The entire process of association and solidarity was a basic aspect which Father Arizmendiarrieta insisted to us constantly, from the point of view of overcoming crisis situations which were going to rise, and in fact were rising over time.
At the end of 1981, there are 10 regional groups made up of more than 6,000 cooperative members. In 1984, the decision is taken to purchase the distribution chain Ivarte, a major customer with serious financial problems.
The decision was taken to acquire Ivarte because probably we would not have faced the decision not to acquire it, because everything was motivated by the enormous debts Ivarte had to Fagor.
3 years later, Ivarte would be sold to a British firm.
In the end, we had to get rid of Ivarte because when we learned the business, when we started to manage it well, we realized that distribution was preventing us from doing what we thought was necessary. We learned then that it is not good when you are in one business to be in the other business, because then you are against your own customers. You are competing with your customers, and this is very bad.
In 1984, the Spanish electrical appliance sector was in crisis. Financial problems, the price war, and unemployment forced the government to set in motion a plan for the rationalization of industry. In addition, the immediate entry into the European community requires substantial changes to adapt to a future single market.
We had to make a giant leap, and in 5 years we had to cover what the Europeans had covered in 20 or 30 years. It was a huge effort.
In the same year, 1984, significant changes start to take place in the regional groups.
At this time, studies were carried out in which it was advocated that the regional groups, based on their geographical proximity, should be transformed gradually into sector groups based on their similar technology.
2 years later, the Ularco group becomes the Fagor group. This is composed of 13 cooperatives grouped into 3 divisions. The group's products are marketed under the same trademark, Fagor. Ulgor celebrates its 30th anniversary and is already the European manufacturer with the widest range of products for the home. The Fagor brand stands out in the market due to its incorporation of exclusive technological innovations. In 1987, the new refrigerator plant opens. It is the first plant in the rationalized sector in Spain. The hard process of rationalization started in 1983, is carried out intensively without interrupting production of previous models and by gradually incorporating the new models.
The aim of rationalization was basically to bring us up to date so that we could compete with European manufacturers. We had to make this leap both in quality and in services, for example in finishes, in everything, and of course, in productivity. The financial results and the processes derived from rationalization were very positive. It started to produce results from the following year. It was very important financially. Rationalization was a phase, and the aim was to be more competitive. This aim was achieved.
In 1989, rationalization of the washing machine, oven, and worktop plants is complete. Ulgor then embarks on a stage of strengthening its position in the Spanish market. The cooperative movement continues to generate wealth and employment.
The truth is that the cooperative movement has contributed a huge amount to the area. I believe that Alto Deva or Arrasate would possibly be nothing nowadays without the cooperative movement. In fact, the big companies that were operating then, like Cerrajera or Elma, have either moved to other places or are almost non-existent now. We experienced rationalization in another way. I knew that my job might become unnecessary, or that I might have to change businesses. But on the other hand, I had a security which other types of companies, or public limited companies, did not offer me. By that, I mean that whilst I would experience rationalization with all the changes it involved, I knew that when the process was complete, I would still have a job.
Before the end of 1989, Ulgor has to deal with the purchase of Fabrilec. This acquisition is a consequence of the industrial rationalization process.
The financial situation of Fabrilec was very bleak. It practically had no owner. It had a sort of management committee or something like that, but it was really dependent on its own administration. And the only option it had was that Ulgor acquired it. We thought about this a lot, because acquiring Fabrilec was not like acquiring Aspes. It had positive effects, without a doubt. From the financial point of view and in terms of the market, there was no doubt. We obtained 2 brands in addition to the 2 we had, and we became the market leaders.
At first, lack of knowledge about the cooperative culture means that the Fabrelec workers are wary of their incorporation as members of Ulgor.
Over time, this distrust became less intense. And this was because we put forward facts which confirmed that our intention was precisely not to keep the brands and just get rid of that.
Although Ulgor has been known for years as Fagor, the change in company name does not take place until the 1st of January 1990. The cooperative then takes on the name Fagor Electrodomésticos. In 1991, Mondragón Corporación Cooperativa, MCC, is established. It is made up of more than 100 cooperatives with strategic unity and organized by sector.
The first time a business policy as such was pursued was when Mondragón Corporación Cooperativa was established. Work began on developing strategic sector plans, and the plans for internationalization were set in motion. Until then, each cooperative was exporting using its own means. From then on, internationalization started to be put forward as a much broader concept than exporting, not only selling, but also manufacturing. In 1992, we started to use the service strategy for the Fagor brand. Within the service strategy, there was a basic concept, which was what we offered to the market with Fagor brand products, which was a 5-year guarantee on parts and components.
5 años de garantía, garantizado. Fagor le da más. 5 años de garantía.
The competition did not offer extended guarantees. The basic guarantee was for 1 year, and we offered a 5-year guarantee. It was the first time that such a long guarantee had been offered on an electrical appliance.
In 1993, the single European market is established. The disappearance of tariff barriers presents Fagor with a major challenge, and it has to adapt to the new rules of play.
The main rivals here were Electrolux, Whirlpool, and Bosch Siemens. This forced us to compete with them, and in order to be able to compete with them, we had to enter the international arena. At that time, Europe concerned us, or rather, going into Europe in their field concerned us. We thought that we needed to start our international expansion in other areas in which they were not active, or in areas which were not their principal concern.
Argentina becomes the first target. In 1995, Fagor, associated with the Mexican leader Mabe, acquires the firm McLean, the country's second manufacturer.
What happened with Argentina was unfortunately very bad, because just when we had managed to overcome that and we were looking at the Brazilian market, there was the Argentinian disaster, and we had to withdraw.
The second step towards internationalization takes place in Morocco in 1996.
The purchase of Morocco. At first we went in with a share of 51% with a Moroccan partner, and it was a market in which historically we sold nothing. And I mean nothing, nothing, nothing. Because it was a market that was heavily protected by customs duties. We thought that it was a good platform for the whole of North Africa. And it went very well. Morocco was a phenomenal success. At the moment our share is very high. Fagor is the most well-known brand.
In 1999, Fagor acquires 76% of the Polish company Brothamet, whose products are marketed under the trademark Mastercook.
Poland is going to become, whether we want it or not, and in fact is already becoming, the biggest manufacturer in the whole of Europe, more than Italy, which is the biggest manufacturer at the moment. We were one of the first, together with Brandt, strangely, and right now they are all manufacturing there. Melloni, Electrolux, Whirlpool, Bosch, some small company called Amica, and us.
During the second half of the 1990s, Fagor strengthens its support to the distributors with numerous communication activities, which will be increased over the following decade. Conventions, product presentations, promotional and advertising campaigns.
We have always done very well on the distribution side because they saw effort in it. And besides that, proximity, which I lay great stress on. has been important in Fagor's history.
Since the mid-1990s, Fagor has also established alliances and joint ventures with companies from other countries.
A joint venture is not easy because it is a balance of members, and relationships are important. Relationships between companies and between people. But I would say that in the case of China, the pressure cookers that we are producing there are going very well, and we are also on for other things. We are buying in China. From the point of view of the pressure cookers, it is going well. Another one, which next year will be 10 years old, is José Gastech, which is the one we did for water heaters with Valiant, which during all this time has been operating very well. And at the beginning, the truth is that it was a unique experience of its type, because we had to do it with workers who were members of the cooperative, but in a joint venture with a company which was not a cooperative.
In November 2000, a fire completely destroys the Vitoria-Gasteiz central warehouse. About 235,000 electrical appliances are lost, valued at more than 36 million euros.
I will always remember that moment. How couldn't I? Suddenly we were left with nothing in Vitoria. But their response was very good. The internal response, and also the response of the market, and indeed of the competitors, who also helped us. It went quite well. 15 months later, we had already opened the new warehouse. But those times were extremely tough. Extremely tough.
Once more, the cooperation and involvement of all the workers ensures that the crisis is overcome within a very short time.
The entire company must have great strength internally in order to deal with a situation like that.
We already knew that the company was ours, that we were members and all that, but it was not something that you see on a day-to-day basis. However, in that situation, when the warehouse burned down, it turned out that either we did it because it was ours and we wanted to work and sell the product, or there was nothing.
Un día habrá un mundo donde se cocinará sin fuego.
With the turn of the century, innovation becomes the identifying sign of the Fagor brand.
Inventar. Innova de Fagor son lavavajillas que lavan a la vez la vajilla más delicada con las piezas más resistentes. Innova es la nueva línea de electrodomésticos de Fagor.
Innovation, in my view, has been present from the beginning in the management model of Fagor Electrodomésticos. You only need to look at our history to see how we started and where we are at the moment. We have launched many innovative products, but if we are referring to recent years, we have certainly been, and indeed still are, pioneers in home automation.
Innovation as such is basically a fundamental strategy in the development of Fagor Electrodomésticos, and it is fundamental because we're going for the leadership. A leading company has to be a company which differentiates itself from the rest, which has something to offer that is different to what the rest of its competitors are offering.
I think that the cooperative movement, or we cooperative members, have a debt to society which is among our principles, the creation of jobs. Just as we have always had this aim and therefore accepted it with society, this has been for me the incentive to do new things, to improve on products, etc.
Innovation in products implies innovation in manufacturing processes. For this reason, Fagor has in recent years tackled a plan for restructuring its plants in San Andrés, Basauri and Garagarza. The new dishwasher plant was to become the most advanced in Europe. At the same time, the quality management model, EFQM, is introduced with the aim of achieving business excellence. The awards and recognition increase each year.
We have achieved various forms of external recognition, some at the level of the Basque Autonomous Community, others at the European level, and others even at the Latin American level, but they are no more than indicators that show in some way that we are heading towards this model of business excellence.
In 2002, Fagor acquires 10% of the share capital of the Elco Brandt Group, the French market leader. 3 years later, in 2005, it becomes the sole owner.
When we became a shareholder in Brandt, we had three aims: to be able to purchase globally, to exchange products, and to try to do launches or carry out R&D jointly. We are focusing our aims. Our strategic aims are going to be in those areas of synergy which enable us to take in this acquisition quickly and continue expanding. International distributors always want companies that work with them at the European level. Until now, we have had an important presence in Spain and in Poland, but not in other countries. So with the acquisition of Brandt, what we have achieved is presence in 2 of the 5 major European countries, France and Spain. And interestingly, France is the hub of European distribution.
In 2006, Fagor approaches the years to come with a new perspective and a new dimension. The company has grown. It is now the Fagor Electrodomestics Group.
With the acquisition of Brandt, we became the 5th European group in the electrical appliance sector, which offers us an irrefutable future. We have doubled the company, doubled sales, doubled the number of employees. In short, we are double the company we were before. So, as the 5th European group, we have much greater strength and possibilities for competing in this sector, however much more competitive it is.
We are currently 5th in Europe, but we have to aspire to be the leader or to be something. To be something means to have presence, to earn respect among distributors and competitors. And our strategy must be to get on the podium in Europe. With reference to the founders, I believe that we have to thank them first of all, but of course also all those others who worked with them and all the others who have continued to work within this movement.
I believe that the cooperative values which have characterized us since our creation are essentially still alive. In essence, they have not been modified. However, the profound changes which the company as such has experienced and the environmental changes undergone over the last 50 years mean that, I would say, that we have experienced and are now witnessing a transformation or an adaptation of the cooperative values. But I believe that we're never going to give them up as such, in essence. But yes, we will have to adapt and enrich them based on the new times and the new way of doing business, which affects us and which is going to affect us over the next 50 years.